Right. Good morning, everybody. As the last few people make their way in and grab their breakfast, you might find we get on to discussing the nutritional value of a bacon roll. So those of you who are chomping through them, not to make anybody feel guilty. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this AHDB Fringe meeting. It seems to me slightly odd territory to be having a fireside chat at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's not quite the right time for me personally, but my name's Mike Gooding. I'm Farming Systems Director at AHDB, and what we're going to do, I'll just make one point of sort of admin at the start. We will finish at 8:45 so that you can get upstairs and get in before the doors shut. I'm very conscious that everybody starts to get nervous as we approach the 9 o'clock deadline. So we will do that. What we're going to do this morning, we're going to have a look at a video that frankly is not aimed at you as a target audience, but is an illustration of trying to talk about the very complex issues in agriculture and particularly livestock. We'll run the video, that means you can eat your bacon rolls, and then we'll get into hearing from our expert panel who all have some points to make around the challenges of livestock in our society and with our diets. So we'll do that, but we will then take lots of questions, and I want to fit in as many questions as possible. You do need to speak into a microphone. I know that at least half the audience here at Oxford feel that they can pontificate without a microphone, but you do have to wait for Lisa to come along with a microphone before you ask your questions. And as ever, pithy and meaningful questions rather than grandstanding statements would be welcome. You need to catch my eye if you want to ask a question, but we'll get to that after the video. Let's run the video and then we'll get into talking to the panel.
Hello, I'm Duncan Golostani. Welcome to this special showcase of Farming a Greener Future, a programme by the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board and ITN Business. Agriculture is facing a huge challenge to support feeding the world's population that's predicted to reach over 9 billion by 2050, requiring 70% more food than we produce today. Throughout the programme, we're looking at the role livestock is playing in providing food security and how it can be produced in a sustainable way.
As the global population continues to rise, so does the demand for food. But the challenge is how to do it sustainably while supporting livestock and nature-based solutions to climate change. AHDB has been working on the issues facing farmers.
I think there's growing consensus now that we do need a dietary shift towards a healthier and sustainable diet if we're going to address those challenges such as obesity, malnutrition and climate change. And a healthy, sustainable diet it's a dietary pattern that's not only good for our health and good for the environment, but it's got to be affordable, accessible, achievable for everyone to be able to follow. For the UK population, we need to encourage people to switch into a healthy, balanced diet, like that recommended by the government dietary recommendations. And those recommendations, the WELL recommendations, they recommend a healthy, balanced diet, which includes a whole variety and diversity of plant-rich foods, such as fruits and vegetables, whole grain cereals, pulses, nuts and seeds. But it also includes animal source foods, such as meat, dairy, fish and eggs. They're really nutritious foods and should be part of a healthy, balanced diet. To provide enough safe, affordable, nutritious food, this is going to be a key challenge for global leaders going forward. And to provide enough food, we have to minimise food waste, but we also need to maximise on the productivity of farmland, and livestock play a really important role in that.
This is Shimpling Park Farm in Suffolk. It's a mixed organic farm which has been in John's family for over 4 generations. But with the pressures of climate change and sustainability, the farm has had to adapt in order for it to survive.
We are now farming without the use of artificial fertiliser or pesticides, and so that's changed our farming system completely into something that is sort of much more natural, sort of building fertility naturally within the soils. And so it's changed hugely, and we've had to learn fast to work out how to do that as well.
As well as eradicating the use of chemical sprays, another big factor in making the farm more sustainable is livestock. This flock of sheep was introduced to the farm 9 years ago.
What role do your sheep play on this farm?
The grass and clover lays are building fertility in the soil. The sheep are eating that and also therefore, dunging on the fields and creating a natural fertiliser. But the other thing the sheep are doing are they're grazing our areas of our farm to keep weeds down, so we don't have to use herbicides. So they're bringing an incredible amount to our rotation.
And most people forget that 60% of the world's biodiversity is not in the air. It's not in the trees, it's under the soil. And soil biology is inoculated by feces, by animals eating and defecating. And so our agriculture is very circular. If we take one part of the circle out, you lose the circularity of agriculture. So ruminants, that being cattle, that being sheep, that being dairy cows, are absolutely important to the biology of the food chain, from animal down into the soil, into the plant, back up into the animal again.
Evidence has shown that when animals are healthier, humans are too. Healthy animals produce more and have better lives, making the production process more efficient for farmers in both the long and short term.
We provide advanced preventative animal health care solutions, vaccination to prevent disease and therefore improve productivity. We work closely with vet practices and farms, and that synergistic approach is really important to make sure that we get the best outcomes for the animals that we can.
It's so important because we really like to have healthy animals and see the young stock coming up through the herd in a healthy way, and breeding our own young stock is very fulfilling. And as part of the vets as well, we work together with lots of our clients to try and increase the efficiency and healthiness of the animals coming through, so that they eventually will be productive animals that will help farmers become profitable and sustainable in the future.
And supporting John to do this is Boehringer Ingelheim, a global leader in the animal health industry.
UK animal health is probably one of the highest in terms of welfare, in terms of efficiency, in terms of the lowest carbon footprint. We work very closely in partnership with other stakeholders in the industry to make sure that we can reduce that carbon footprint through good health, reduce disease incidence, and certainly vaccination and other medicines play a part in keeping the animals healthy, which help human health and the environment as well.
Health of livestock plays an important part of the production process, but ensuring the animals are happy and comfortable is just as paramount. Platts Agriculture supplies powdered animal bedding to farms across the UK and Northern Ireland, and it's committed to welfare sustainability.
We collect wood residues from the wood manufacturing industry nationally, and those byproducts from the wood manufacturing processes are brought back to our site here at Clyde, and we make them into really specialised value-added products that have been designed over the 50 years to support animal health and welfare and increase milk yields.
The life cycle starts from the trees in the forest. They're sourced sustainably by our suppliers. That byproduct then is collected in a trailer, otherwise going to landfill or being burnt, and then we bring that back here, and then it's manufactured on our sites and then sent out to farmers. The farmers typically use a cupful on a mat twice a day. We've seen a 30% reduction in plastic. In 2020, we recently installed our hudder, and it keeps the pallets nice and waterproof for the farmers so they can be stored outside for up to 2 years.
Due to the excellence of the materials and the consistency of delivery, we have seen reduced somatic cell counts in herds which previously had a problem, and we've seen reduced clinical mastitis rates after changing and moving forward with Platts bedding.
Reusing and recycling, farms are making a positive impact, and it's not just on the surface. Regenerative practices enhance biodiversity and take farms back to traditional methodologies. To get the most from their fields, farmers are embracing technology to give them the data they need to help empower them to make positive changes.
The Cool Farm tool itself is really about that quantification and the democratisation of knowledge so that the farmers have that information to be able to make those informed decisions themselves. We span the supply chain, so we've got multinationals and we've got NGOs, and one of the things we've created recently is a farm advisory board to help us bring the voice of farmers into the Alliance so that they can air their grievances, they can share their opportunities and their best practices. It allows a channel of communication to take place.
Nowadays, there's all sorts of fantastic bits of kit that we can use to help us to baseline information, understand better what's going on in our soils and around us, and use that to sort of guide our management practices. Embracing technology in farming is actually absolutely key if we're going to move forward as an industry. So I think it'll benefit farmers all over the UK.
We need our farm businesses to be resilient, we need the land to be resilient, economically, financially, environmentally at the same time, as well as socially. This tool enables farmers to be able to tick off some of the things, some of the challenges that they're facing.
Finding the right equipment can make a huge difference. Bobcat leverages their 60-year heritage in farming, working closely with farmers to create technology that is both effective and sustainable.
Bobcat is assisting sustainable agriculture through a series of new innovation. We have lots of technology coming through, which may be smart screens, sensors, lasers, cameras, and all of this means more productive operation of the machine and also doing that in a safer environment. We comply rigorously to all the legislation to ensure that we meet all the noise and emissions legislations on diesel engines to ensure they are as clean as possible. We incorporate a lot of clever electronics to ensure that we're getting maximum efficiency from the engines by having electronic control units control the machine rather than the operator. We're already selling full electric in the market in terms of compact excavators, and this is scalable technology. So we started by being able to put full electric packs into the smallest machines, knowing that we can scale it up and apply it to anything that's larger.
But one major challenge in recent years has been a declining workforce.
I think the biggest change that we have seen really is the shortage of labour. So that's why people are looking to go down the machinery route and invest in new machinery so it can do more. And through Bobcat and through the equipment that we provide, it allows people to do their jobs quicker or more efficiently so they have time then to focus on the more important things.
Passion for soil, crops, biodiversity and the health and welfare of animals is an integral part, not just in the production of food, but in keeping the planet alive and thriving.
Thank you for watching Farming, A Greener Future. We hope you enjoyed this programme. To watch it in full, the details are on the screen now. But from me and the team at ITN Business, goodbye.
So that video is an illustration of the important work, or some of the important work, that AHDB is doing in trying to communicate what is a very complex message. And it's interesting. Bear in mind that this video is really aimed at the wider audience, and we'll catch up with Amy about public perception. I'm not sure how many people on Oxford High Street will understand what somatic cell count really is. But these are the challenges that we have in trying to get over some very complex issues. Let's turn to the panel. I'll introduce them in turn and I'll ask them to speak a little bit about their subject. So John Gilliland next to me first of all. John is probably well known to all of you and has an extensive CV, a former president of the Ulster Farmers Union, chair of DEFRA's Rural Climate Change Forum, a farmer, I'm pleased to say, a farmer, and working with AHDB. Now, John, we've heard a lot about soil over the last 24 hours. We've seen a lot in the video. about soil. Your work in Northern Ireland is a particularly interesting project, I think, trying to assess soil data across every field in Northern Ireland is both ambitious and, I suspect, unique. Perhaps you'd outline that work and talk about where the opportunity is for us wider across the UK.
Well, in 2014, I was approached by the Permanent Secretary in Belfast to put together a multi-stakeholder group, and we needed what they said, a sustainable land management strategy. And our task was to go away and have a look at it. When you're asked to do something like that, one, I wanted balance because I wanted to actually get complete buy-in from both the industry and from the NGO community, that the direction of travel was really important, so getting that balance right. But the first thing we did is we actually did a state of knowledge on what was going on out there. And the clear thing, Northern Irish agriculture is predominantly livestock based, is that we are some of the best livestock farmers that you'll find. But the one thing, we focus on animals, we don't focus well on our soils. And what we found is only 12% of our soils were in good health. Something that shocked us. A lot of us were not doing soil sampling and analysis. And so when we came to produce our final report, we said, well, you can't measure, you can't manage. And it starts right at the start. And we recommended that every field, every tree, every hedge in Northern Ireland should be measured. And I remember when we put this out, everyone took a big intake of breath and said, wow, that's ambitious. And it was. But we got some money to pilot it. And in 2017-18, led by AFPI, the Agri-Food and Bioscience Institute, we piloted 3 catchments. Interestingly, it was a voluntary initiative. 80% of the farmers in the 3 catchments signed up. They had this aerial survey done using LiDAR to look at topography, trees and hedges. But we actually put independent boots out on the ground to sample soils. And we then gave that information back directly to each farmer, their own information, not their neighbours, with training. And 2 years later, we put a team of social scientists in from Leeds University to measure to see did any behavioural change happen. And lo and behold, we had up to 80% behavioural change when we empowered farmers with really good information about their own farm. And that became then the plank that went into the business case that went forward in Belfast. Is if you stop talking at farmers, but talk with farmers, if you give them information that is really pertinent to their business, not their neighbour's business, they make better quality decisions. And better quality decisions isn't just about helping the environment, it's about putting resilience in their business. They also make more money. You know, better quality decisions isn't just about the environment, it's about an economic development of that business. And we found that certainly if we could get soil right, starting with the very simplest, soil pH. You know, 65% of our soils were not at pH 6. And as we move away from synthetic nitrogen to legume agriculture, we're actually needing to move that closer to 6.5. And we have a big job to get that done. But that's one of the cornerstones if we're looking to get ourselves in the direction. Everyone talks on the journey to net zero about methane. Well, I would argue actually the big one in livestock agriculture is reducing nitrous oxide emissions. It's 270 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than methane. Methane is 26 times. So what we've been able to do, if we get our soils right by measuring and empowering farmers, actually that is the very first start. It also allows us then to come back every 5 years and measure change. Because if you're going to go on a journey of change, if you don't know where you're starting from, how do you know you're making any progress? And when I come and now that I'm supporting AHDB here in Great Britain, one of the things that astonishes me is where's the baseline? Even when I've done work in the Republic of Ireland, where's the baseline now? We need a baseline, and we need it to one standard. And that's what we've achieved in Northern Ireland. And on the whole, it's had a good reception. Yes, there's a big debate about data governance and whatever, but at the moment, we've got half of Northern Ireland into the scheme with a 92% uptake. And I just look at why aren't we doing this here as well? Because at the end of the day, this is putting our faith as society back into farmers and land managers. They are our future. Yes, we create emissions, But you know something? As Chris Brown said yesterday, we should stop looking at our sector as a jet engine and only focus on its emissions. We should actually be looking at the totality of the system and the role that carbon removals and soils play in that.
You mentioned Chris Brown. He was quite vocal yesterday. It was Chris, as ever. He gives a good one-liner, doesn't he? How much do you think that lack of data is holding us back? Do you think it's the biggest opportunity for us?
Well, one of the key things that AHDB does is it defends the industry. It builds the reputation of the industry. And without a robust data set, how do we do that? And at the moment, what we use is modeling and averaging. And that gives no reflection to actually the entrepreneurs, the early adopters, and the change they're creating. They get dumbed down. They're averaged down. So I'm absolutely passionate that what we want to do is empower farmers with their own data, not their neighbors' data, and that we make really good decisions based on sound data. When you only use an average, you actually make perverse outcomes. And it's really important we call a spade a spade. There is a lot of challenges in the media against our sector. A lot of them are using international data, not using local data. A lot of them are using what we call Tier 1, which is an international average, not Tier 2. We actually want to get to Tier 3, which is individual farm data. And so when I'm engaging, I mean, I've had the privilege for the last 4 years to chair a farmer-led innovation project back in Northern Ireland called Arc Zero. And our focus, we see, is granular data recording is our ally, not our enemy. Is the information we're getting from this precision soil sampling, from our aerial LiDAR surveys, is allowing us to make really good quality decisions. And actually looking at, when we make a decision, can it deliver multiple wins? Because our job as farmers is to produce really good, nutritionally dense and diverse food. Because more than anything else, the health of our nation, and I mean the health of the human population, is fundamental. And the role of livestock in giving that balance into that diet is fundamental. So working along, and I was delighted when I joined AHDB. Before me, Kate joined AHDB, and Kate is our human nutritionist, and I've known Kate for quite a while. And it makes a great combination of the role of livestock products in human health, the role of livestock production, and environmental health.
We'll come on to Kate in just a moment, but John, if the Secretary of State was still here this morning, you did the project in Northern Ireland, and it's sort of about halfway through, isn't it, in terms of getting around all of the fields. How much would you be asking the Secretary of State to invest to do the rest of the country?
In Northern Ireland, the scheme is £45 million for roughly 880,000 hectares. It's 3%, on an annual basis, it's 3% of the total subvention that Northern Ireland gets of public money. If you take that across and then look at the total subvention in England, 3% is not a huge amount of money. And I've, in the last 2 days, listened with interest in the media between certain political parties arguing how much money DEFRA has handed back to Treasury. And I just said, you know, well, we reckon it probably costs us about 80 million to do England. And I think the figures that were in the Guardian was about 100 million a year was being handed back. And I say, we could have had this, you know, and we could have used that to empower every single AHDB levy payer and other farmers who are not levy payers too. And I think that's a missed opportunity. And I still say to this day, if you really want, and you know, both as a farmer, if I want to prove, you know, I'm a grandfather and I watch my children go to school and they're having a great education, but they're told, you know, animal agriculture is bad, plant-based agriculture is good, and we're written off before we're even starting. And that's because we don't have the data. Now we have the data. And on my own farm, we're actually beyond net zero today. When we did our 7 farms, 2 were beyond net zero already. When we then looked at using the proper methane methodology, 3 were beyond net zero today. And even in our intense dairy farms, 2 of them, they're in the project, including carbon sequestration and using the right methane measurement methodology, those 2 dairy farms are actually 50% of the way there before we really open up the bonnet and get into what other behavioural changes we can do.
Well, look, let's move on from environment and soils and talk about nutrition. So Kate Arthur is lead nutritionist at AHDB. Kate's a registered dietitian with over 30 years experience, sorry Kate, 30 years experience in the NHS, food, retail and manufacturing industry. So she's highly experienced in applying nutritional science and marketing into consumer communications. Kate, yesterday nutrition was referenced on a number of occasions here at the conference. Can you remind us all of the benefits of livestock products to us as humans?
Morning, everyone. Yes. Oh, before I drop my papers. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in that video earlier on, we all need a dietary shift towards a healthier and sustainable diet. And the great news is red meat, dairy is an important part of a healthy, balanced diet. And I think, unfortunately, meat is being demonized. Meat particularly is being demonized in the press because of the environmental concerns. But meat and dairy, livestock products are really, really healthy and really nutritious, a really important part of the diet. So if we look at red meat, for example, it's got so many different micronutrients. It's full of all those vitamins and minerals that we need every day. Things like iron, vitamin B12, vitamin B6, B2, zinc, selenium. And these are nutrients that are actually lacking in the UK diet. If you take iron, for example, 49% of young girls have low intakes of iron. 9% are actually deficient, and that figure is increasing. If we're telling young girls to eat less meat, more are going to become deficient in iron, as well as other nutrients as well, things like vitamin B12 and zinc and selenium. We're seeing low intakes, particularly in young children and older people. So that's a real concern. And dairy as well, really important, obviously, in terms of calcium and lots of other vitamins and minerals as well. So if people are cutting out on animal source foods, they could become nutritionally at risk. And I'm really concerned that, you know, it's the nutritionally vulnerable. It's young girls particularly. It's pregnant women. There's been quite a lot in the press over the past few weeks about pregnant women being deficient in micronutrients, and the elderly as well. So, yeah.
There were important announcements yesterday, not so much announcements, but sort of political observations about public sector catering. And, you know, I think here in Oxfordshire, we have some very interesting drivers around public sector catering, which is very much demonising meat. And it's largely, I suspect, to do with budget controls and challenges in things like school kitchens and not having catering facilities. But the value that we don't recognise is what it is for those young people or people recovering in hospital. Kate, people talk about less meat, but what is less meat? I mean, what does that mean in practice?
That's a good
How
question.
much was that bacon roll I had for breakfast?
I think the less meat message I don't necessarily agree with, because it's, you know, what does less actually mean? We hear it all the time, oh, we all need to eat less meat, but what does it mean? Even the government, the Eat Well Plate recommendations talks about less meat. But the government recommendation is that we should eat no more than 70 grams a day. That equates to about 500 grams of red meat each week. On average in the UK, we eat around 63 grams. So we're meeting that government recommendation. So if we're telling people to eat less meat, what does it actually mean? How much less meat should people eat? And is that the right message? If you're a consumer that's currently meeting the government recommendation, you know, if you're going to further reduce your intake, you could become nutritionally vulnerable. And that's my concern. So this one-size-fits-all message is just not appropriate. You've got to factor in individual dietary preferences, you know, cultural needs, social needs. It's very complex. So we've got to get away from this sort of one-size-fits-all message and think about individuals and their dietary needs and what they need on a daily basis.
So 70 grams a day, and a bacon roll is about 40 grams, you told me. So there you are. That's for all of you in the audience to reference. Look, let's move on, Kate. That's really interesting. I suspect we'll come back to nutrition in the questions and answers. Let's move on to Jude Capper. Jude is ABP Chair of Sustainable Beef and Sheep Production at Harper Adams University. Call it a university now. I always knew it as a college. Anyway, Jude's work has been in addressing the environmental impacts of sustainability of livestock production systems, looking at whole holistic systems, taking a much wider view. And she's been close to much of the research and technical developments that have been going on in the industry. Particularly interested, Jude, in those things that are both reducing our emissions, but also offering us opportunities to make a positive contribution. Perhaps you could give us a sort of overview of where we are in our technical developments and give us some thoughts about where the most exciting opportunities are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could show my age by pointing out that when I started at Harper as an undergrad, it was an agricultural college, but I don't want to quite go back that far. But yeah, I think we're in a really exciting place. We have so many opportunities, both for sort of high tech, like this tag that I have here, and relatively low tech things that do things to improve productivity and efficiency every single day. And as John was saying earlier, not only do we need data that's targeted to the farm, we need tech that works on that farm. Just as Kate has just said, there is no one size fits all. There is no silver bullet that if you just use, this, it'll work for every farmer and on every farm. And we do tend to be very focused on greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, that makes perfect sense given the governmental and the retailer focus on that area. So we have opportunities, for example, in Zelt masks, which have been developed over the last couple of years. They're still in the testing phases. They have some really exciting opportunities. They're a bit like a head collar, basically, for cattle, and they act sort of like a catalytic converter, as it were, to change methane into carbon dioxide. We've also got a lot of feed additives. Many of you will have seen that Bovaer, which was developed by DSM, was approved just a couple of weeks ago. So they offer some really good opportunities, particularly for dairy cattle. But again, there's no one size fits all. And with many of the feed additives, they have to be fed every single day. They have to be fed more than once a day. So they give real opportunities for intensively fed animals or animals fed a total mixed ration, not necessarily so applicable for extensive beef cattle, for example. We also got really exciting opportunities, I think, in terms of animal health. So many opportunities with boluses, with sensors, with ear tags that can measure movement, they can measure rumination, they can measure estrus, they can give us those early indications of when animals become ill. And I think that bit's going to be really, really, really crucial, because we can have a really good animal health plan, we can have vaccination protocols in place, but it's that early monitoring that gives us really good opportunities to identify those cows or other animals at risk of ill health and then to treat them accordingly. So many opportunities, but as has been said, there is no one size fits all for every livestock operation.
Jude, I'm very interested in, John made the comment that 80% of the farmers are engaged in the work in Northern Ireland. Farmer engagement is a real challenge. Now, as a farmer, I know if it's going to save me money, that's a great motivation. In many of the areas of technical development, it's interesting hearing you sort of reference policy and retailer demands. And if I think of something like, methane reducing feed additives, where there's a lot of work going on at the moment, do you think the fact that that doesn't necessarily affect my profit and loss account other than being a cost, whilst it delivers to other people benefits, if you like, further up the supply chain, that will restrict the take-up of those technologies?
I think that's a really good point. And on almost every project that I work on at the moment, I say, I hate to say this, we can do all this wonderful work, but changing farmer behavior is really, 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 really tricky. And I would love, again, to be able to say that every technology, every feed additive that we use will also improve efficiency and also improve productivity. And I think those will come, but at the moment, as you say, we don't necessarily see that economic benefit as well. And I really hate to say this, but I think the answer is that it'll become part of the cost that we have to pay. It'll be a pay to play, as it were. If you want to supply retailer X, processor X, you will have to use A, B, and C, or you will have to be able to demonstrate that you can cut carbon, improve biodiversity, improve soil carbon, etc., by X% over time. I think we're just going to have to accept that it's going to be part of the market.
That perhaps gives us an entire different conference topic to talk about the differences in, you know, the level of integration in the various supply chains in the different sectors, and you know, that I think is quite obvious to everybody out there. Now, perception, Amy. Let's come to Amy Jackson. Amy has over 25 years' experience in communications and PR. She'll be familiar to many of you, particularly for her work in the dairy sector. Amy, you spent a lot of time studying public perception, what makes people change their mind. She runs her own Oxtail specialist communications agency here in Oxford. Much of the public commentary, Amy, about livestock has been focused on the negatives. There must be an opportunity for us, to use a cricketing metaphor, to get onto the front foot and perhaps drive some of the agenda. It seems largely to be driven by single interest groups, pressure groups. To many in the industry, we've not been able to set the narrative. We've not been able to succeed in perhaps some of the communications, like the sorts of things we've looked at in the videos. What lessons does this industry need to learn about delivering convincing arguments?
Well, I think it's a great start. We're getting the data, because we can't do anything without data. So data is really, really important. But I think where we often make the mistake is thinking we're just going to slap that data down on the table and everyone will be happy and it will change everyone's minds, and it doesn't. And I think one of the problems we've got is there's already preconceived notions out there. There's a narrative, and we have to get a foothold somewhere to change that narrative, and then to be able to deliver our information credibly and for it to land. And I think this is a challenge we actually had a few years ago with the antibiotic debate, which I was very involved with, where the narrative was that the livestock industry is causing drug-resistant infections. And then there was just this backwards and forwards between it's caused by medicine, no it's not, it's caused by livestock. And it was just exactly what's happening now is debates whether it's aviation and travel or it's livestock. And actually you need to move beyond that and say, look, we can't necessarily agree that, but what we can agree is we all need to do something. We are all in this together and we all need to play a part. And I was actually listening to a podcast the other day with Barack Obama, and he was talking about how you bridge the divide between Republicans and Democrats in the US. And he said back when he was campaigning in 2008, he said that he often used to open an argument with people who were in opposition saying, look, you know, Democrats haven't always been on the right side of history. You know, our hands aren't clean. But that is an opening, and that's actually an entry point for him. And he says his aim is to get people who might be fearful or suspicious or wouldn't listen to just stop and think this person actually sees me and understands my concerns. And that's what we need to do, is acknowledge the fact there's a lot of people that are very anxious about what's happening with the climate. They have a narrative that it's caused by livestock, and we need to acknowledge that fact. And rather than say, no, it's not, we say, we hear you, and we need to be part of the solution as well. And we need to acknowledge where we could have done better. We need to say we're working on the data, not so we can defend the status quo and justify doing nothing, but so we know what to do so we can make a difference as well. And I think it's all about framing it in the right way, rather than just saying, we'll just use GWP star and we need to do nothing. And that's unfortunately the polarized nature of the debate at the moment.
So just to demonstrate my parental failings as a father of teenage children, when I look at the power of things like social media, Amy, and that messaging, firstly, I have a concern that we're not arming our young people with the ability to be able to identify good information from the rubbish out there. Do we have to engage with that sort of medium of communication? And how do we make that more successful in getting over, as we've seen from the video, what are actually very complex issues?
Well, I think, again, I mean, I saw a really interesting backwards and forwards earlier on this week between Minette Batters and Mark Avery, ex-RSPB, and I was just watching it on Twitter thinking, where is this going? Because Minette was actually saying, you know, come and meet me, talk to me, let's sort this out together. And Mark was kind of grandstanding, and it was very performative. And I just don't see the point of getting into those debates. It's not getting anyone anywhere. Where social media can play a role is to think about, can we expand it a bit? That's really interesting. You've got that view. Yeah, we take it really seriously as well. Here's some information that we're working on, and that's where the data comes in. But if we're going to get into discussions with the opposite end, so if we think of a bell curve and we're at one end, in quite a small minority, sort of 1% of the population, and the very vocal NGOs or our detractors are quite a small minority in the other end, there's no point in engaging with them over social media. What we can do is try and use social media to reach that big mass of people in the middle who have lots of other things going on in their lives, who don't think about this on a daily basis, who probably just want to feel good about their choices, to support the local farms in the community or to buy animal products. And that's where you can have a more pointers to data, to information, which I think as well should be balanced. And I think something else we need to do in the industry is not just present this rosy glow and sort of curated information that just supports our message. We actually need to have some of the negative stuff as well and say, well, yes, this is some stuff which points out where there's some issues that we need to address, because that's how we get credible, and that's how we become trusted, and that's how we start to be able to land our messages better.
So do you think we shy away from some of those difficult arguments?
Totally, yeah. I mean, when I hear people saying, oh, you know, farmers, they're fantastic salt of the earth, they get up at 5 o'clock every morning, they love their animals, and then people turn on Panorama and see a cow being hoisted up by her hips, that just says, doesn't mesh together. So I think what we need to do is be far more honest, and people actually value honesty. It's credible. Like, you know, Barack Obama saying, we've not always been on the right side of history, our hands aren't clean either. That's the message. Antibiotics, we said the same. Look, we're not squeaky clean in this. There's stuff we need to do, and we're trying. Transparency helps with that. And people shy away from transparency, saying, yeah, but people will see we've done this and that, and we've got this issue. Well, no, because you say, we see this as well, and we want to address it, and this is how we want to do it. And, oh, we've not quite managed to succeed on that. We need to change our plan. Like, share, because people actually value that honesty because they know life's not perfect.
I think it is interesting, love him or hate him. I've had more conversations as a farmer here in Middle England about Clarkson than you know, it's really sparked the imagination of a lot of people. Do we need a Clarkson, Kate, in the world of nutrition, do you think?
I don't know who that would be. Yeah, there is so much misinformation out there, particularly around nutrition and health. Every day in the media you see stories around nutrition and health and misinformation, so it's no wonder people are concerned or confused. You know, we've got to get the right messages out there. But unfortunately, you know, the right messages are often the boring messages. You know, a healthy, balanced diet, it's just not the sexiest message to communicate. People want to try fatty diets, and, you know, obviously over the past few years it's been all about plant-based eating. And I think the problem with plant-based, it's become sort of the vegan diet. And we're in January now, and people are probably trying veganuary for a couple of weeks and then give up, realizing how hard it is. But yeah, it's how can we change consumer behavior? How can we make that dietary shift so we can change consumer behaviour towards that healthy, balanced diet that the government recommend? You know, less than 1% of the population actually follow a healthy, balanced diet. Less than 1% follow that Eat Well guide. You know, how can we actually nudge consumers to eat more healthier? And yeah, we need to get the right messages out there about healthy eating.
Gosh, that's less than 1%
Yeah.
offer follow-up.
It's 0.1%.
Right. John, you're shaking your head. Right, we've got about 10 minutes for questions. So as I said, please wait for the microphone. Lisa, come dashing forward. Gentleman here in the second row, Lisa. That'd be great.
Hi. So just a quick clarification on something that Kate said, and also a general question to the panel. Kate, you said that red meat is a part of a healthy diet. Presumably you mean red meat can be a part of a healthy diet, given your making the point about one size doesn't fit all, and you're not saying that a non-red meat diet is unhealthy.
No,
that's So that's great. If you can clarify that, and
yeah.
then I'll just give the other question as well. So the more general question to the panel is that the Climate Change Committee sixth carbon budget works on the assumption of a 20 to 50% reduction in meat and dairy consumption assumption. So, you know, that is driving quite a lot of behavior, I think, in corporates who are being asked to help meet those things. So I just wondered how far you're engaging with that Climate Change Committee and how you feel about those assumptions.
So, Kate, a quick clarification, and then perhaps, John, you want to talk about climate change.
Yeah. So red meat can be part of a healthy, balanced diet, but not everyone needs to eat red meat. You know, some people choose not to eat meat and animal source foods, and that's fine as well. You know, everyone has their own dietary preferences and cultural, religious reasons for, you know, whether they eat red meat or not. So I think there's no reason why you can't follow a healthy vegetarian or vegan diet. But I think the message we're trying to get across is that red meat at the moment is, you know, it is part of a healthy balance. It can be part of a healthy, balanced diet.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. How engaged are we?
Okay, so for corporate world responding to CCC's request, it's predominantly been driven by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is a global organization, and they lead the drive around Scope 3 emission declarations on corporations. So anyone involved in processing through into the retailers, that's the key lever that they're pulling to get this driven. Now, I represent AHDB on a partnership called the Food Data Transparency Partnership, which is between DEFRA, the industry, and the Institute of Grocers and Distributors. Now, that's quite a lively partnership. We're waiting for our first sort of milestone to be published in the next month or so. But it would be fair to say, and most people know the view of AHDB, and I referred to it in my opening comments, the CCC is without recognizing the role that livestock production can actually do in carbon removals. And what people forget is the Greenhouse Gas Protocol themselves now recognize that. So they themselves have a review ongoing at the moment about carbon removals in the land-based sector. That is to report back in the third quarter of 2024. And I think we need to be very careful not to make decisions that are no regrets, okay? Or should make decisions of no regrets. And I'm just saying, hold on, let's see what they say, corporates, because at the moment, the clue is in the name. It is Scope 3 emission declarations. We are articulating it should be Scope 3 net carbon declarations. And that is a transformation for what livestock agriculture can do. Because what we've shown in our Arc Zero project in Northern Ireland is when you add in carbon removals, suddenly you greatly diminish the size of the challenge, but you can also energize them to do more. You know, we are the only sector that currently have no statutory recognition of carbon, the price of carbon. We have a voluntary market, which is a bit of a Wild West out there. While we've got Australia already got a statutory scheme for land-based, you know, 2023 saw the first 7 beef grazing farms through that scheme, where they subsequently sold their carbon at $93 a tonne against a voluntary market of $40 a tonne, because they had a single certified framework in Australia. Our European colleagues have just passed in the European Parliament a single certification scheme for carbon removals. We're not having this discussion in the United Kingdom. Why? So we need actually to start to bring some of these other issues up. And can we have a bit of honesty and transparency as we go forward? Because right at this present time, as a farmer, which I am first and foremost, I am really frustrated that only one bit of my balance sheet has been looked at. Agriculture is cyclic. Yes, I produce emissions, but you know, I do a wallop of carbon removals and I drive biodiversity. And the most, going back to Amy's comments earlier on, the most effective way that I have changed behavior and changed society's perspective on what we do in my farm was a really, you know, you can say it was tongue-in-cheek. We buried cotton underwear under our different soil uses. And lo and behold, everywhere that we had cattle feces, when we dug up the cotton 2 months later, all we had was elastic and labels. And anywhere where we had no feces or animals on that land, we dug up a full pair of underpants. Well, you know, and when you show that, and we have a lot of visits to my own farm, it is the most visual way of showing to lay people out there that actually cattle feces is an extraordinary gold mine of bacterial and fungi. And that 60% of the world's biodiversity is under the soil. And that feces is gold dust to drive that.
Amy, yeah, you need bursting. So I should say that the only thing extra you need, John, on your farm is some sheep, but we can sort that out afterwards.
I just wanted to add something very briefly about behaviour and regulated behaviour and farmer behaviour, and I'm going to draw on the antibiotic story. What is really important to recognise is I think that there is not a perception that this industry is taking this issue seriously at the moment, and this is really, really important to help with that narrative. But if we look at what happened with antibiotics, is we were getting pressured, we were going to have targets. When we stepped up and said, we get this, we absolutely see the importance of this, we are going to set our own targets, they're going to be meaningful targets. Over the period of the following 3 to 4 years, the regulator developed so much trust in the industry that we were driving then the agenda rather than it having being driven for us. So that change in behaviour is really important. We need to make people feel that we get it and we can be trusted to do the right things. The second bit is about farmer behaviour, is when farmers started to see that they were getting a positive reception and that people were really liking what was happening with antibiotics, they got engaged because they wanted to be part of that. And I think that self-reinforcing loop is something we could really
instead of getting beaten up all the time. There's a question down here. We'll try and sneak 2 questions in quickly.
Thank you. Brilliant panel. Thank you so much. And John, you're brilliant. I wanted to just ask, actually, I want to quote somebody very short. Brandy Wilson from Simplot Company, one of the world's biggest agri-businesses. She says, instead of asking how do we change farmers, because she goes to conferences all over the world and everywhere is how do we change farmers, how do we change farmers? She says, we should be asking how do we change ourselves to create the markets and the environments where farmers can flourish and be creative and use their brilliant knowledge and skills and experience. And I just wondered what your reflections are on that. I mean,
okay, think about that, Amy. Lisa, if we could have the microphone. There's a gentleman over here in the 3rd row who's had his hand up on the corner. James, do you want to make personal responsibilities this is about and corporate responsibility?
I'm just going to say that I think, yeah, absolutely, we need to always be open to changing. Everybody does to solve this problem. At the moment, there's a lot of it's someone else's problem and that we never get anywhere. And when we actually said with antibiotics, this is our problem too, that's when the change started to happen. So, but we need to disarm people by recognising what their concerns are and taking them seriously.
Thanks, Amy. A very last question here.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, Paddy from Roomy. I guess this question's largely for John, but I think in Northern Ireland, collecting lots of data, but farmers' own data about their own farm was really engaging. I love that, it's brilliant. One of the challenges we have, and I think many, is making big amounts of quite overwhelming data into usable insights. So I was wondering, how did you manage that with farmers to say, look, here's your own data, it's really engaging, but how do you bridge the gap to behaviour change?
Well, the one thing we didn't, yes, they all got a copy of their data set, but the thing that's most impactful is the colour maps we sent with it, because I can speak for myself in regards, I'm dyslexic, and I suspect there's a fair degree of that in the farming community. And the most impactful for us that we've seen is actually not just our soil maps and lovely coloured maps, but actually the imagery that comes from the LiDAR. The LiDAR is stunning. You see your naked landscape, you see your 3D of your above ground biomass, but also our runoff risk maps of how we've combined soil phosphate with aerial LiDAR to give us, and you look at that, I say, that's really accurate. And you say, that makes sense. I understand that field, and I understand, so, now if I'm going to do a riparian strip, I'm not going to do the whole way parallel to the stream. I'm going to do this bit because that is, so we've made it relevant. We visualized it because the one thing farmers hate is spreadsheets and spreadsheets of data.
As I heard the other day, life is about love and passion, not spreadsheets and bank accounts. So we'll end on that part. I'm sorry we have run out of time. You need to get upstairs. Please thank the panel for their contributions. And thank you very much for attending this morning.